I used to think that getting divorced at 52 would be the end of my life, but it turned out it was just the beginning. After 10 years of caring for my bedridden mother-in-law, I didn't get a single word of thanks, just 3 cold words right after the funeral. Before we dive in, hit that follow button so you don't miss any of the drama, emotion, and jaw-dropping twists coming your way. We're getting divorced. But what he didn't know is that I had been preparing for this moment for a very long time. The day I started to see the truth about our marriage wasn't the day he cheated, or the day I uncovered his hidden financial secrets. IT started quietly, with the smallest gestures. Things I didn't notice at first. I had grown so used to caring for his family, so used to sacrificing bit by bit, that I no longer recognized who I was. And my entire life revolved around meeting the needs of my husband, his mother, even our children, but there was no room left for me. Back then, I woke up early every morning, made breakfast for everyone, took care of my mother-in-law, dropped my daughter off at school, and came home to continue the endless cycle of chores, and my husband, Louis, was barely ever home. When he did show up, dinner was already on the table, and everything was in place that I tried to keep everything in the household running perfectly. But I think I was the only one who felt the weight of it. Louis lived as if he was the center of the universe, leaving me alone to handle all the invisible responsibilities. Then one day, while cleaning the house, I stumbled upon a notebook he had carefully hidden. That I opened it and saw numbers, figures I had never seen before. IT was a large amount of money that Louis had been spending on something I never imagined. A secret bank account where he had been sending money to Bianca, a woman I had heard about, but never met. IT felt like my heart was being crushed, like a part of me had been stolen without my knowledge. I end that moment. I realized my life had become nothing but taking care of others, without getting anything in return. That I had been too weak, too complacent in keeping this family together, and now I had to face a devastating truth. I had been deceived, not just emotionally, but financially, and about everything I thought was solid. Bianca wasn't the only one Louis had been hiding. That my mother-in-law, Marjorie, quietly supported everything he did, even encouraged him to treat me like a maid. The two of them had an unspoken agreement that I would handle everything in the house without asking for anything, while they enjoyed their lives without lifting a finger. And why mother-in-law never once sympathized with what I was going through. Every time I felt drained, she'd remind me that I was part of the family and that I should feel lucky just to be here. When I discovered everything, I didn't scream or cause a scene. That I quietly began planning how to rebuild my life, and that's when I made my decision. Divorce. But this time I wouldn't be leaving empty-handed. That I would fight for what was rightfully mine. This house, those years of my life, and even the freedom I had long lost. I would never again let anyone see me as the weak one. That when I finally filed for divorce, Louis looked at me with wide, stunned eyes. He had no idea what was going on. Clueless that I had been making my own plans for a long time. From that day forward, I didn't just leave him. I left behind everything that made me feel unworthy. I was no longer the woman who lived just to care for others, but a woman who was strong, determined, and I would never again let anyone take away the respect I truly deserved. I didn't leave in tears. I left with evidence. After Louis said those 3 words, "We're getting divorced," I knew this wasn't about emotions anymore. This was a game of chess, and I wasn't going to lose. For 10 years living in the shadows, I didn't just endure, I observed. I remembered everything. The hospital bills I paid for him, Tessa's tuition that I quietly covered, the medication, the mortgage, even those so-called business trips where he withdrew money from our joint account and sent it somewhere else. I never forgot. After that night when he asked for a divorce like I was just some worn-out thing, I did something I never used to have time for. I sat down and reviewed everything. Every receipt, every bank transaction. I gathered everything, page by page, not for revenge, but to return the truth to myself. 2 weeks later, I invited him to sit down for a civil conversation. Louis, thinking I had softened, showed up looking generous. He wore a fancy shirt, gave a smug smile, leaned in, and said, "Let's not make this hard, all right? I'll keep the house and the car. You can have the secondary account and a $50,000 support check. Consider it a thank you." I dropped the folder on the table between us with a heavy thud. His eyes froze. I calmly opened it and flipped through the pages. "Here are the hospital bills for your mother, totaling $142,300. This is the ledger detailing every time I wired tuition payments for Tessa when you claimed the account was empty. And this Lewis is the deed to the house. It was purchased after we got married. My name is on that contract. If you want it, you'll need to buy out my share at market value." He stayed silent, his face frozen. I continued, voice steady and cold. "The car, it's registered under my name. I paid for repairs, insurance. You can keep it if you compensate me its equivalent value. As for the retirement account, I'll be requesting a division according to legal statute." Lewis sighed and leaned back in his chair, like he couldn't believe what was happening. But I had been preparing for this moment for a decade. "One more thing," I looked him straight in the eye. "I cared for your mother, unpaid, for 10 years. Not one day, not 1 week. Every day, every night. And I will be seeking fair compensation for that care labor. It is my right, and I will pursue it to the end." I didn't yell. I didn't tremble. I spoke like I was reciting a contract he forgot I had also signed. For a few seconds I saw his eyes, confused, then angry, then panicked. Because for the first time he no longer controlled the narrative. That night I began calling lawyers. I wasn't the wife tossed out of her husband's life like an old pillow. I was a woman who carried the whole family, and now I was reclaiming every brick I laid. When you spend your middle age sacrificing for others, you learn one thing. Kindness unguarded by reason gets exploited with contempt. And I'm not allowing that anymore. Not one more time. Divorce didn't end me. It set me free. After signing the papers at the law office, I walked out into the Seattle afternoon sun. A city that once felt cold and unfamiliar, now glowing like a rebirth. What I held in my hand wasn't a divorce decree. It was a passport to begin again. I left the old house with light steps, even though my heart still carried unnamed wounds. But the first thing I did after reclaiming my rightful share wasn't to go on vacation or splurge to prove I'd moved on. It was to quietly find a place to start over. The one-bedroom apartment in South Seattle wasn't fancy, but it was quiet and full of sunlight. The kitchen tiles were dated, the balcony rail had peeling paint, but I saw potential in every worn-out spot. I hired a local handyman to paint the walls a warm beige, then hung linen curtains I'd picked out on a rainy afternoon, the kind I used to be told were impractical. Now, warmth is my priority, not approval. Tessa, my daughter, came to help me move. She brought 2 young co-workers. They joked around, filling the little apartment with a kind of carefree laughter I'd long forgotten. When they saw me carrying a heavy cast iron pot, one girl exclaimed, "You've totally got YouTube cooking inspiration vibes." I laughed, not because of the compliment, but because for the first time in years I laughed for real. Not out of politeness, not out of strength, but because I saw myself. On my first morning in the new apartment, I made a cup of chamomile tea and sat on the balcony watching people pass by. No blaring TV, no groans from a sick bed, no complaints about weak coffee or burnt eggs. Just me, the sun, and an oddly peaceful morning. With the money from the divorce, I didn't buy designer bags. I invested in myself. A watercolor class at the community center, gentle yoga, and some outdoor Latin cardio sessions. At first, I was clumsy, offbeat, embarrassed by my age. But an older woman, Sharon, patted my shoulder and said, "We're not here to perform. We're here to live." And I lived, truly lived a little more each day. My first painting was a lily bending in the wind. Someone asked, "Why not paint people?" I just smiled, because I'm learning how to paint myself back in. I took a part-time job at a small nearby library. No pressure, no deadlines. Each day I shelved books, chatted with patrons, and quietly realized I'm valued not for what I do, but simply for being here. An elderly woman in her 70s came every week with homemade cookies. She said, "Ms. Rachel, I've never met anyone who picks stories quite like you." No compliment has ever made me feel prouder. I also reconnected with old friends. The ones I used to cancel on because I was cooking for my husband, taking care of my mother-in-law, or because someone at home didn't like me going out. Now, we meet up for weekend walks, trade recipes, and even go to outdoor concerts together. I have a group chat now. I have names popping up on my phone, not to assign chores, but to ask what I ate today. One afternoon, while sipping tea with Tessa on the balcony, I asked her, "When you were little, did you ever think I was weak?" She looked at me, paused, then gently said, "No, but I used to think you forgot who you were. Now I see you've come back." I smiled, a smile that didn't need to prove anything. I used to think that when a woman turns 50 and enter marriage, her life dims too. But the truth is, for the first time in years, I hold my head high, not for anyone else, but for me. I no longer measure love by how much I endure. I no longer dress to please others. I choose lipstick that makes me feel fresh, bold print dresses because I want to stand out, not disappear. And one weekend evening, I stood in front of the mirror, gently touching my flushed cheeks after yoga, and whispered to myself, "Rachel, you're back. And this time, you won't leave yourself behind again." Never in my life has being 52 felt so radiant. I used to think that walking away from a marriage after 20 years would break me. But in the end, it wasn't me who crumbled. It was him. When I left, Eric didn't cry. He didn't beg. He didn't even seem surprised. He just shrugged like he dropped off an old box at Goodwill. I imagine in his head I would fade away quietly, too exhausted and too lonely to survive without him. He must have thought I'd come crawling back. But he forgot. I'd already spent a decade being alone while living in the same house as him. Eric's world post-divorce was eerily quiet. No one brewed his morning coffee. No one picked up the socks he left under the couch. No one reminded him to take his blood pressure meds or paid the bills while he complained about work. Freedom, right? That's what he wanted. Well, he got it. He started showing off his new life on social media. Photos of him fishing, raising a glass with old friends, captions like, "Time is gold. Don't waste it on what no longer serves you." To outsiders, he looked free. But they didn't see the pile of dirty laundry fermenting in the washer. They didn't smell the takeout boxes rotting on the kitchen counter. They didn't hear the silence echoing through a house that used to hold life. I didn't have to guess. Tessa told me. She visited him a few times in the beginning. One night, she came over to my apartment and quietly said, "Mom, I didn't realize how helpless he is without you. He doesn't even know where the vacuum is." The first winter after the divorce, Eric caught a nasty flu. No soup. No warm blanket. No one to pick up meds from the pharmacy. He was too weak to make it to the heater and too stubborn to call for help, until he slipped in the bathroom and blacked out. He woke up under fluorescent lights in the ER, hooked to an 4 drip, surrounded by strangers. The man in the bed next to him had a wife peeling an orange for him. The guy across the room had kids bringing him snacks and books. Eric's bed was bare, not even a visitor's jacket on the chair. It hit him then, the kind of loneliness he always accused me of exaggerating. A few weeks later, we bumped into each other at Whole Foods. I was pushing my cart through the organic produce section, picking up salmon, fresh greens, and herbal tea. I looked up and there he was, standing awkwardly in front of the low-sodium instant noodles. He looked terrible. Gray stubble, greasy hair, a faded windbreaker, filthy sneakers with one broken lace. He held a single cup of noodles, probably doing the math in his head. His eyes widened when he saw me. I, on the other hand, was wearing a clean navy coat, freshly done hair, light makeup. My cart was full of color, texture, and choice. He froze. I didn't. I simply nodded and said, "Hello, Mr. Simmons." Those 2 words, Mr. Simmons, hit him like a slap. He stammered, "Rachel, wow, you look good. I mean, how have you been?" I gave him a polite smile. Not warm, not cold, just distant. "Doing well. Thanks for asking." As I turned to leave, he blurted out, "And Tessa? How is she?" I paused. "She's doing great, just like me." And with that, I walked away. The next few days, the texts started. At first, simple greetings. Then came the checking in messages. Then the confessions. His back pain was worse. He couldn't sleep. He didn't know how to cook. He felt lost. And finally, the memories. "Remember that dinner you made with the rosemary chicken?" I found our old wedding picture. I still dream about our old kitchen sometimes. I didn't reply. Not one word. When that didn't work, he started calling. He even tried the library where I work. I finally picked up the phone and said calmly but firmly, "Eric, we are legally divorced. Emotionally, too. Your pain is no longer my responsibility. Please don't call me again. I hung up and stood there, hand still on the receiver. Not shaking. Not angry. Just done. Sometimes closure isn't slamming a door, it's locking it. A few days later, Tessa stopped by, her face tense. Mom, he came to see me. He cried. He begged me to talk to you. Said he made a mistake. Said he has nothing left. I looked at her and asked gently, What did you say? She hesitated, then answered, I told him you're finally living the life you deserve. And he shouldn't drag you back. Not again. I pulled her into a hug. I didn't say it, but I felt it. That moment was the final nail in the coffin. Between Eric and me, there was no bridge to rebuild. Just ashes. And in those ashes, I bloomed. Eric kept reaching out. More desperate, more pitiful. His messages turned nostalgic, then pleading, then bitter. I remained silent. For the first time in our lives, my silence wasn't weakness. It was protection. One night, I wrote in my journal, letting go doesn't always mean hating someone. Sometimes, it just means you've finally heard enough. That's where I was. Not angry, not resentful, just free. He thought I'd fall apart without him. He couldn't have been more wrong, because I didn't fall. I rose. Ever since I posted my Turning the Tables story online, Eric went completely silent. No more pity posts, no more sneaky calls. Every attempt to guilt me had failed. But I knew, with someone like him, that silence wasn't growth. It was strategy. A few weeks later, I got a call from Tessa. She sighed and said, Mom, Dad came to me, crying. Said his back hurts, he's broke, no one's taking care of him. I promised to find him a place with basic medical care, but Dad... Tessa hesitated. He's asking if you could come back. Just for a few days. Just so someone's there to help. I wasn't mad at Tessa. She's not easily swayed, but she's loyal. I simply replied calmly, I'm not going back to be his unpaid caretaker. Not for old time's sake, not for memories. I've let go. She was silent for a long moment, then said softly, Then I'm with you, Mom. Always. Soon after, Eric tried another tactic. Jane, his sister, showed up at my door, holding a box of cookies and wearing an apologetic smile. She sat down on my couch like she was delivering some sort of moral message. Rachel, I know he doesn't deserve you, but he's really suffering now. He's all alone. You were his wife for 30 years. You're all he has left. I set my teacup down and looked Jane straight in the eyes. And when his mother was bedridden, who took care of her? Where was he when I was exhausted, when all I needed was a thank you? Yes, I was his wife, but now I am free. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. My voice was calm, but final, like a red-hot iron line in the sand. Jane dropped her gaze, stood up, and left with just one sentence. I get it. I'm sorry. I knew very well. Someone like Eric doesn't give up easily, and I wasn't about to wait for the next round. I met with my lawyer, filed for a restraining order, and prepared documentation in case he resumed harassing me, even indirectly. I told Tessa, next time your father tries to reach me, I'm calling the police. I don't hate him, but I will protect myself. She squeezed my hand. This time, you didn't just stand up, you held your ground. Eric was later placed in a government-funded nursing facility on the outskirts of the city. It was clean enough, quiet enough, and cold enough to remind you, this is where people go when they've been left behind. I didn't go. Tessa handled the paperwork, dropped off a few essentials, and said nothing more. He never reached out again. Maybe he finally realized no tear, no memory, no leftover title had power over me anymore. My life moved on, steady and full of color. At the library, I was chosen to host the community's summer reading event. One of my watercolor paintings was selected to hang at City Hall, a misty landscape titled, Finally, Just Me. They asked why I named it that. I just smiled, because it's the first time I painted for no one but myself. I kept teaching beginner art classes every Tuesday afternoon, joined a dance group at the park on Sunday mornings, and spent weekends browsing farmers markets with Tessa. I started buying seasonal flowers, not the cheapest ones. I ate slower, laughed more, Wore makeup just because. I liked the way I looked in the mirror. One day, while brewing tea in my little kitchen, I looked at the sticky note on my fridge. 4 goals I'd written the day I moved in. Find a decent job. Relearn what I used to love. Reconnect with real friends. Learn how to love myself. I smiled. All 4 bullet points now had a check mark next to them. I used to think I was just background in someone else's story. A mother, a wife, a daughter-in-law. But turns out I was always the main character. I just hadn't rewritten my own script yet. When someone asks, Rachel, do you ever think about falling in love again? I smile gently. I already have myself. The longest, most loyal love I've ever known. And that's what I want every woman to know. Peace doesn't come from holding onto someone. It comes from not letting them back in. I didn't go back. Not because I'm cold, but because I finally realized I deserve a future that's fully mine. If you've made it this far and felt even a fraction of Rachel's pain, her strength, or the light she found at the end, leave a comment below. What do you think about her journey? Have you ever sacrificed so much that you lost sight of yourself? Share your story, because your words today might be the spark someone else needs tomorrow. And if you believe every woman deserves to live a radiant, powerful life, hit that like button, subscribe, and follow for more bold and inspiring stories like this one.